And Manhattan DA Robert Morgenthau said 15 members of a crew directed by reputed mob boss John Gotti were charged with running a murderous multi-million-dollar gambling enterprise in our town. Dave Browdy has that story.
The indictment makes these guys look like a mob straight out of an episode of The Untouchables. Ernest Grillo and Michael Scarola are said to have headed a crew of the Gambino family that terrorized a neighborhood on the posh Upper East Side, forcing landlords and businessmen to give them office space, apartments, and rooms for a casino, killing a rival who wanted a piece of the action.
I'm a good guy, but I don't want to...
Siddharth Vora didn't want to talk about what had happened in the back room of his candy store. There are now video games where the mafia allegedly ran operations, threatening him with violence if he said anything about it. But next door, the owner of a restaurant who, according to the indictment, actually accepted money, payments on loans carrying up to 364% interest, was more than willing to appear on camera.
No, that's impossible. Impossible. This is a legitimate business over here. All I want to do is make a living and support my family. As far as loan sharking, anything out like that, it's totally out of order.
Fernari is an unindicted co-conspirator. In court, the only words uttered by the two defendants, Grillo and Scarola, were identical not guilty pleas. Their lawyers sought to portray them as good bail risks and to show the state's case against them as weak. But prosecutors say Scarola and Grillo both have big mouths, particularly when it came to the killing of a rival.
Mr. Grillo met with Mr. Hogan. Mr. Grillo and Mr. Scarola left the restaurant with Mr. Hogan, and Mr. Grillo and Mr. Scarola returned to the restaurant some 45 minutes to an hour later. At this point, in a relieved and jovial mood, Mr. Hogan was never seen again. Statements were made to the effect of, we've taken care of our problem.
The prosecution said the defendants had made phone calls from jail threatening witnesses, warning them against testifying, saying they'd be out soon and would take care of anyone who talked. They won't be. The judge is holding them without bail, at least until the trial begins sometime early next year. I'm Dave Browdy, Fox News Channel 5 at State Supreme Court in Lower Manhattan.
Tommy Gambino, 62, and his younger brother Joseph, 60, walked into Manhattan Supreme Court for the start of opening arguments in their trial on racketeering and extortion charges. The Manhattan DA has accused the Gambino brothers and two co-defendants with operating their trucking company, Consolidated Carriers, and an interlocking system of companies as a cartel that had a monopoly on how business was conducted in the garment center, a cartel belonging to the Gambino organized crime family. Essentially, the DA is presenting a different kind of mob case here. Low on violence and flash, high on bookkeeping and implication. In other words, the daily boring routine of a mob business. And at the center of the case are two of the most boring people ever accused of being mobsters, the brothers Gambino. I mean, take a look at these guys. They've got two of the saddest hangdog mugs a jury's ever had to look at in a mob trial. Now compare that with the look on this guy, the current popular notion of what a mobster allegedly looks like. Gotti commands the front pages. The Gambino brothers fade into the woodwork. Gotti supplies colorful quotes like his reference to what he calls Prosecutor John Gleason's obsession with him. Quote, "This guy, you know what he says to his wife when he gets up in the morning? Hiya, John." The Gambinos, on the other hand, only recently raised their profile by announcing a $1 million gift to Long Island Jewish Hospital. Prosecutors say they supply the mob with millions more. Yet even the Gambino attorney had to tell the jury that his client was a friend of John Gotti's. In fact, a young John Gotti is shown on this surveillance tape many years ago outside a Gambino place of business where he was supposedly employed. Have a minute of your time? Real quick.
We're working hard.
We just want to know if you could summarize for us what your opening remarks were.
All we want is the truth.
Pablo Guzman, Fox News, New York.
Court news is all in the family today, the Gambino family. A big surprise in Manhattan where the government played let's make a deal with brothers Thomas and Joseph Gambino. Right in the middle of their trial for controlling the garment industry trucking business, prosecutors agreed to drop the case. In return, the Gambinos agreed to get out of the trucking business, pay a $12 million fine, and plead guilty to only a violation of state business law. But this way they avoid jail. Thomas Gambino is allegedly a capo in the crime family that still bears his father's name. Well, the guy who allegedly heads the family now is accused of masterminding the hit on the Gambino brothers' uncle so he could take over. Chuck Gomez is covering John Gotti's trial, and he reports that prosecution tapes reveal drugs may have been the motive behind the rub-out.
The government says alleged former Gambino boss Paul Castellano entered into an agreement with reputed Genovese family boss Vincent Chin Gigante that any crime family associate caught dealing drugs would be history. Tapes show that alarmed Gotti confidant Angelo Ruggiero, who in 1983 was indicted for heroin smuggling.
Him and Chin made a pact. Any friend of ours that gets junk, or if they hear anything about junk, they kill him, no administration meetings, no nothing.
The government says the tapes show that Gotti's younger brother Gene, who along with Ruggiero was indicted in 1983 of heroin smuggling, was convinced he and Ruggiero would be the targets of a Castellano hit. Castellano demanded copies of FBI tapes recorded in a bug put in Ruggiero's home in 1982. Gambino underboss Aniello Delle Croce and Gotti appeared torn by Castellano's demand.
Call me tomorrow and tell me to set one of my best friends up. I won't do that.
Today, the defense tried to show that Gotti was opposed to drug dealing and had agreed to turn over the Ruggiero tapes to Castellano. That's clearly an attempt to dilute the government's claim that Gotti ordered Castellano killed because Gotti's closest confidants were in imminent danger of being killed themselves. Later today, two witnesses who allegedly saw the men who killed Paul Castellano outside a Manhattan steakhouse in December of '85 are scheduled to testify. At the federal courthouse in Brooklyn, Chuck Gomez, Channel 9 News.
Chicago's great gangsters are coming back to life here on Channel 9. A new dramatic series, The Untouchables, premiered tonight and will air Mondays at 8 p.m. on Channel 9. New York has its own modern gangland. Tonight, Reg Wells shows us how things are going in the local murder, numbers, and leg-breaking business.
John Gotti went to jail for life last year, convicted of murder, extortion, and racketeering. Paul Castellano was murdered outside a Manhattan restaurant in 1985. A year later, Louis DeBono was killed in a parking garage. All this activity attributed by authorities to
La Cosa Nostra.
In New York, there are 5 underworld families. The family tree looks something like this. The Gambino family is the largest, followed by the Genovese, Lucchese, Colombo, and Bonanno families. But attorney Bruce Cutler, John Gotti's lawyer, says many of these people are unfairly badgered by the government.
Because of a certain label, because of association, because of a lifestyle. That's all wrong. That's not American.
However, prosecutors say organized crime is big business from the waterfront to the boardroom.
Italian organized crime is well entrenched in legitimate industries, that is, in the garment center, in construction throughout the city, in all kinds of union activities.
One day, a businessman, maybe he runs a small karting company, mom and pop karting company that's being successful, and all of a sudden he gets a visit. And all of a sudden he finds that either he has another partner or he may end up in the hospital.
What does Cutler think of this?
It's just a lot of bull.
Cutler said his client was a legitimate businessman, but says Gotti's business affairs were confidential, as everyone else's should be.
How he made his money is something I don't discuss with anybody.
You didn't discuss that with your client?
No, I never discussed that with anyone.
And what I discussed with going to pay you?
And what I discussed with John, of course, Reg, I don't discuss with anybody.
So with the jailing of John Gotti, are mob figures as strong as they once were?
I think that we have moved from an era of 10 pins to duck pins.
Of course, I don't subscribe to any of that nonsense. All the government has done is put some men in jail for the rest of their lives. That's what they've done. They've accomplished nothing for the quality of life in New York City, nothing whatsoever.
And John Gotti is now appealing his conviction.
So you can tell those law enforcement people about the 10 pins and the duck pins, my rejoinder to that.
I'm Reg Wells, Channel 9 News.
53-year-old John Handsome Jack Giordano, known as a super loyalist of lifer convict John Gotti, survived an attempted rub-out outside Lenox Hill Hospital last night, but 2 of the 3 bullets fired into Giordano's body severely damaged his spinal cord. Giordano is expected to live, but may be paralyzed for life. He had been visiting a still unknown person in Lenox Hill Hospital and had just gotten into the passenger seat of his chauffeur-driven car when a white Cadillac drove by slowly, its driver firing 6 shots at Giordano and then speeding off. Giordano's driver threw his car into reverse, slamming into an ambulance as he attempted to escape the hail of bullets.
We came outside and there was glass all over the place, and the police were already here. What we heard from bystanders is there were 5 shots and the victim caught 3.
When John Gotti was arrested for ordering the shooting of a carpenters union official several years ago, Handsome Jack Giordano was by the Dapper Don's side. But now that Gotti is in prison for life with no chance of appealing his way out, lawmen expect a war for control of the 450 soldiers in the Gambino crime family. Some mob experts believe last night's hit on Giordano may even be payback for Giordano's part in the Gotti conspiracy that triggered the 1985 hit on then boss of bosses Paul Castellano. Gotti engineered the Castellano murder without the permission of the Mafia Commission. If last night's attempt to kill Handsome Jack Giordano is the start of a mob war, Rackets investigators say John Gotti Jr. may be another likely target, as would be the imprisoned Gotti's brother, Peter Gotti.
Bob O'Brien, Fox News, New York.